It is the DC Sports Huddle. It's sponsored, of course, and we thank them by MGM National Harbor for the latest in Washington sports. Visit MGM National Harbor and experience a sports fan's paradise. And a sports fan's paradise, it means every team playing. And, of course, the NFL is now playing because basically we're into NFL draft season. Dave Johnson along with Rob Woodfork, George Wallace. Did I forget anybody? Oh, Rob Woodfork. You're still there, right? Yeah, Rob Woodfork.
Yeah, I'm around.
I hope I can't list 4 people. It's amazing. All right, here we go. Next week's the draft. Next Thursday. This week we're going to discuss defensive picks. Next week, offensive picks. Guys, I'm just going to throw it out there real quick. I have not studied tape left, right, and center, but everybody's talking about Notre Dame Fighting Irish safety Kyle Hamilton as a pick that we should go with if we're going defensive at that position. And all I keep seeing is us getting beaten by the long pass last year. So I don't have to go into deep edits to discover we need secondary help. So that is my pick. We're going to go on the defensive side of the ball, 11th overall pick from Notre Dame, Kyle Hackett. You're on the clock, Rob Woodfork.
I'm with you on that. I 100% agree. If Kyle Hamilton is on the board there at number 11, you got to pull the trigger on that. Obviously, they just let go of Landon Collins. And even when he was here, he was resistant to that so-called Buffalo nickel position where you're the hybrid linebacker and safety. Well, that's what Kyle Hamilton does extremely well. So not only is he good at it, but he is also open to actually playing that position. So the biggest disappointment of last season was that defense. We expected significantly more. And I think if you have that versatile piece on your defense, that helps take you to another level, regardless of how the defensive line is playing.
And I think I called him Kyle Hackett at the end. I started by calling him Kyle Hamilton. That's what happens when you get up at 3 a.m. Maybe make it clear. Go with Kyle Hamilton. See, yeah. I'd be fired if I was on the commander's staff. I'd draft the wrong guy. Dave Preston.
Kyle Hamilton. Along those lines, didn't Isaiah Thomas draft Ronaldo Balkman thinking that he was getting Rolando Blackman a few years ago next to the ground? So these things can happen.
That was
I like Kyle Hamilton, but I think the big question is, will he be available at number 11? Sporting News has him as the second-rated prospect in the entire draft. Now, I think that a lot of these guys on the defensive side of the ball will slip to number 10, number 11, number 12, because there's always the propensity to pick a quarterback much higher than he should be. I'm thinking maybe at the number 11 spot this year for the Burgundy and Gold, Derek Stingley Jr., cornerback out of LSU. He played on the highest stage in the SEC. They grow defensive backs like trees down there in Cajun country. I think he might be a guy also. I think Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati, played it. He wasn't at a Big Five conference, but he's a guy who's a playmaker and who can do a lot of things as well. So I think we are all in agreement that the secondary is a primary concern. They might want to get an edge rusher just to add depth on the front line, but when you are drafting in the first round at number 11, very often you're getting the best available player on the defensive side. And in today's day and age where free agency rips guys off of your roster 3-4 years into their contract, you can't afford to stockpile, say, the best, or I guess the idea is you're always going to have the opportunity to stockpile players because those guys are going to be gone within 3 or 4 years. So.
And to your point, best available player, and in football, it's very much offense, defense. It's broken up, but I've been in enough draft rooms where I've seen that to be the case.
George, just real quick, I looked at 4 or 5 mock drafts before this, and in every single one of them, not only was Kyle Hamilton on the board, Washington passed on him for a receiver, and he goes to the Texans at number 13. So I think he'll still be on the board at 11. You're going to get somebody who's going to come up and get a quarterback. You might get a couple of trades up, but this is going to be a very defensive-heavy draft in the first round, I think.
All right, George. I know you, George, you were waiting to jump in earlier, so jump in.
No, I was going to say I don't think Kyle's going to be there at 11, but you never know. I mean, to Rob's point about the seeing offensive wide receiver, I get it, but you need so much on the defensive end. And you mentioned, I'm going to go away from the corner. One of the mocks seeing the talk about possibly trade Jermaine Johnson as an edge rusher. So I could see them going that way. Washington corner Trent McDuffie, I think is also a possibility. But I like Preston's from LSU. I like his pick as well. That's the one I've seen the most as far as at number 11. But if we're going to go away from the secondary, let's go Jermaine Johnson. And look, I mean, there are going to be options there. Look, they need that help. You talk about Landon Collins going
as well. But they, are departing, I should say, as well. So they need to kind of restock that back end of the defense. And look, the strong point's still going to be the front seven, and that's what they need to make sure they get a strong year out of. Hopefully Chase Young comes back, and then you kind of, plug it with the secondary. Like we've seen them try and do it before, but hopefully now there's no pressing need to go quarterback at 11. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I get it. So now you can kind of maybe focus on more of your need and not best player available. I've always been best player available kind of guy, but right now I'm leaning towards that back end of the secondary.
All right, I'm running the draft clock. Time is up. Good choices, guys. It looks like it's me and you, Rob, against Dave and George. So that means
like those odds.
Whoever's right buys happy hour. We'll broadcast live for a happy hour next week. The offensive.
That'll be a fun episode.
Wait, from the MGM in Vegas.
And I guess in addition to making the right move at 11, I think with only 2 other picks in the top 150 for Washington this year, they've got the 47th and then the 113th overall selections. They really need to hit on these picks as opposed to other years where they've had multiple second and third round selections. They really, because the best, your roster is built in those. There are outliers, guys outside of the top 120 picks who make rosters, who do well, who become all pros, who become Tom Brady. But those guys are few and far between. You really need to hit on your on players that you take in the top 120 of the draft. And that makes pick 11. That's a huge pick for Ron Rivera and company. But I think pick number 47 and pick number 113 are just as important for this current regime. They don't have to be stars, but they have to be guys who fit into the final 53. They need to be guys who you're talking about in the depth chart every week. There need to be guys who pop up on videotape when you're watching the games on Sunday.
All right, do we agree real quick though? If Hamilton is there, that should be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
At 11.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
To me, it
Unless you want to trade all your picks for a quarterback.
Yeah. Well, to me, George, it sounds like you're a little worried about our happy hour bet. So anyway, so listen, and we'll get the clock running on baseball, and we'll start. Dave Preston, not only do you look good in a blue sweater, but you've been doing a lot of work in a ballpark. The Nats Notebook on WTOP.com. It's where I get all my stuff. Anything I say on the air that's remotely intelligent about baseball, I stole from you. So thank you, Dave. I need the job. I need the career to continue. I had a dream, by the way, that Adone adjustments does well. Gray starts to come around, and Patrick Corbin wakes up, and maybe we have a season still. Your thoughts, Dave? What are you seeing?
Well, right now they just have to get through this current stretch. They will have one off in the first 18 days of the regular season. And that puts pressure on your starters, that puts pressure on your bullpen. I think after they started 16 pitchers in one position, as fate would have it, the position player D. Strange Gordon is the one who goes on the injured list. So this team has to hold together. I was very encouraged with how Josiah Gray and how Yohan Adone pitched on Tuesday, because a bad doubleheader for your starters, that blows up a bullpen. And both of them pitched very well. So that's really encouraging. Eric Fetty has a Wednesday night start. He's had a couple of good starts in a row. So eventually you would think that Patrick Corbin is going to come around. Eventually, in theory, we're going to see Steven Strasburg start. But I like seeing what the young kids have done so far when they've had opportunities. And it's one of those that you have to walk before you can run, before you can sprint. And I'm impressed with how Davey Martinez is kind of coaxing growth out of Adone, out of Fetty, and out of Josiah Gray to start the season.
All right, George, you were there too at the ballpark.
I'm gonna go. I'm encouraged. I think finally seeing what Victor Robles finally snapped out of his 0-for slump and had the big double in the opener yesterday, and then continued again the nightcap, having getting on base. So I think that is a big part of this team. If he can start coming around and getting some key hits, because we know what the top of the order is going to be with Soto and Cruz and Bell. But if you get production from the bottom, which we have seen a little bit this past week, then maybe, you're going to have opportunities to score some more runs. But I think Victor Robles is a key here, guys. I really do. You saw what happens, and he was slumping. He was 0-for to start the season and snapping out of it now with some run producing hits. So I think that's a big, big plus coming out of the doubleheader and heading into this week.
Rob Woodfork, as always, the WTOP Emotional Sports Barometer. We turn to you, Nationals. Josh Bell, can we get Nelson Cruz going? What's on your mind?
Well, we talked about Victor Robles as we in our preview of the Nationals a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, getting him on track is obviously key. Also, getting these starters deeper into games. I mean, that second game of the doubleheader with a dome, that was the first time we got a starter into the seventh inning. So they need to get these guys a little deeper into games. Obviously, they have a lot to do with that, but you just got to be able to get these guys deeper into games so that it's not as taxing on your bullpen. Because we did see with Rainey, we didn't get out of that ninth inning unscathed there, loading the bases.
He did it for dramatics. He did it for dramatics. Had a 1-0 lead. Let's load the bases with nobody out. I know this.
For the 11,000 people who were there, let's make it interesting for you so you can't get to the metro.
All right, here we go. This is fun. I'm sorry, George.
I was just going to say real quick, as far as the starters are concerned, this also we could be seeing now. Look, spring training, you'd still be in spring training if you're ramping up to the season. So maybe Davey's starting to let the leash go a little bit on these starters, which if they're able to do so, then we'll see him go a little further in games. Save the bullpen. So we could see that as we lead up here the next couple of weeks.
Spot on about that, gentlemen. I actually asked Sean Doolittle the day before the regular season began. I asked him that with spring training only really 2 weeks, you guys this is still mentally, or for your arms, it's mid-March. Imagine a starting pitcher or even a relief pitcher's arm as a cake that you're baking in the oven. And, it's still right now, the cake is still in the oven for a lot of these arms. So it's almost been a chess match for Davey and the coaching staff to make sure that they maximize these guys, but they can't afford to burn them out, because I think we saw in 2018 when the bullpen was burned out, Ryan Madsen and all the other guys, even Doolittle, those guys were toast by the All-Star break because of overuse in April. I think they've done a much better job this time, and kind of, all right, they're going to have to give up a game here, but they're going to save the arm for later this season.
All right. Always makes me nervous. I haven't opened an oven in 20 years, and you always go there with baking things. That tells you Dave Preston from a good, hearty New England family, and I was lost in the microwave generation. All right, a fun finish here. That guy on the Zamboni, was that really Marshawn Lynch? Hey, celebrity owners, who do we get? Now, he's going to be part of the Seattle Kraken ownership. Maybe they told him, hey, $2 million, you get to drive the Zamboni. And he said, I'm in, or whatever. But the point is, and I'm going to start this, and I'm not making this as a crusader, but I've noticed the impact. Let's get more athletes, and specifically minorities, involved in ownership groups, and not just positions where it's just, okay, they've invested. Welcome them in to the point where they're visible, making a difference in the community, driving community initiatives. No, they're not going to make personnel decisions necessarily, depending on what the sport is. The reason I say that, DC United, example, Mark Ingram Jr., is not going to make personnel decisions because he's a former football player, but he is active in the DC United ownership. Yo Gotti is active in the DC United ownership group, and it's fun and it changes things. And so I think that is something that hopefully we get more of when we're talking about celebrity owners, because it can inject some energy. And if it is their sport that they're investing in, like, I don't think Marshawn Lynch is going to be advising the hockey personnel, but if you get it where it's the same sport, yes, they can also add their input if they like, but only if they want to, because again, a full-time front office gig in every sport is actually a full-time job. All right, go, guys. Who do you want to see jump into maybe one of our sports around town?
You know who here, let's have some fun with this. You know who I want to see involved somewhere, somehow? Dave Chappelle.
Oh,
you like that one, huh?
Nice pull. That's a nice.
There you go. Dave Chappelle. Look, I mean, he's Dave Chappelle is Dave Chappelle. That could be fun. I don't know what sport at all, but it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
That's you want a guy from the area that could interject some life into something. There's your guy.
I like it.
With another Dave, not Dave Preston, not Dave Chappelle, but Dave Grohl from the area. He'd be great with the whichever team brings him along. They played a Foo Fighters song at the end of Nationals wins for the longest time on the broadcast. But he could fit in with the Caps. He could, because he's got the hockey beard already for all intents and purposes. He'd be a guy who would. Could you imagine saying play ball before Nationals games too? It just or let's go Caps in the helmet before Capitals games, or even do something before a Wizards game, or heaven forbid, wake up excitement in the Commanders. He'd be a good, he'd be fun.
He doesn't want to go to Landover. He doesn't want to go to Landover.
He doesn't want to go to Landover. We can get the guys from OAR to go to Landover.
All right, Rob, bring us home.
I'll give you two. Chef Jose Andres, humanitarian, and obviously a great quote too. So I'm all for that, selfishly for our job. And a guy who's knocking at the door for the NFL and he's not local, Jay-Z. I think it's almost inevitable that we're going to see a Jay-Z NFL ownership, especially as they're now trying to get themselves in a position to add. And the Denver Broncos right now are for sale. I'm not saying Jay-Z's in the mix, but I'm saying that they are maybe going to see what they can do about getting some minority bidders involved in this. So I would say Jay-Z is a guy that would be a real fun. And look, he can do his own halftime show if we ever get a Super Bowl here, right?
Perfect.
Very nice.
I tell you though, one thing about celebrity ownership, the downside. Years ago, covering a Wizards Brooklyn Nets game, and I'm in a hurry to get to the locker room. You know how it is to be a reporter. You want to get to the locker room and get the sound bites, and I'm getting slowed down, and I'm getting frustrated, and I'm thinking, oh, God, who's this crowd in front of me? And boy, is she making me mad. I don't care that she has lots of friends around her, and et cetera. Then I get on the team bus. I realized it was Beyonce holding me up. So, I mean, I didn't stop and spend some time with Beyonce, but I got the sound bite. So the next morning, George Wallace, Dave Preston, and Rob Woodfork could have the coach of the Wizards explaining why we hopefully beat the Brooklyn Nets.
I wish you would have gotten Beyonce.
No, I don't
take that.
Beyonce holds a lot up. She holds a lot up, guys.
I tell you what, if there's a story to be had, chances are I'm looking the other way. But listen, we're always looking for the story here on the Sports Huddle. Next week, offensive draft picks with the 11th overall selection for the Washington Commanders. We're getting closer to the Capitals playoffs. Maybe we're going to end up with the number one goaltender. We'll see, and lots more to talk about. As always, it's been a lot of fun hanging with you guys. I hate to admit it, but it is. George, Dave, Rob, thank you, and thank you for watching and listening. We're sponsored by MGM National Harbor. For the latest in Washington sports, visit MGM National Harbor and experience a sports fan's paradise.
Break.